Hey folks, everything new under the sun. Is there money in the Ukraine war? Absolutely, there is money there. And would that cause some interest for companies, even countries who are being lobbied at the highest levels to stay in the war, to draw out the war? Well, U.S. pays a whopping $400,000 for what amounts to a $25,000 missile supplied to Ukraine. Defense firms strike gold thanks to Russia, it says. So apparently on CBS 60 Minutes, they did a little reveal on the U.S. arms manufacturers here, and the U.S. is making a lot of money on this, not only through arms but also through natural gas, supplying it to Europe since Nord Stream was shut off, right? So they can't get it from Russia anymore. So yeah, U.S. is making money hand over foot. The defense industry, the energy industry, um, you know, you'd almost think that these people who are making this money, might be interested in prolonging the war and might not have any interest in stopping the war, given how much profit they're making and how much citizen tax dollars they're getting in the name of war against Russia for all these things. The U.S. government is paying all this. Look at this. Lockheed Martin started at 98 billion. By the end of the year, it had reached 127 billion. Its highest since record shows. Northrop Grumman started at 61 billion and ended at 84 billion. It says it's a huge profit center for big companies. Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon, Boeing, says William Hartong, a senior research fellow at Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, where he focuses on global arms trade and Pentagon spending. At the moment, they're riding the wave, and they're riding the wave at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer and the Canadian taxpayer, all the countries that are adding money to this thing. We're paying it. You and I, our tax dollars are paying for all this, and people are making a lot of money out of this stuff, folks. So is there any incentive to stop the war? No. Have you seen any indication by the United States that there was any interest in stopping the war? No, the leaders aren't even talking about it. They just want to keep going to war. Incredible. This is interesting. You talk about nuclear war, and I think we go to some sort of nuclear war, first strike, and it probably will only take one strike. It's not going to be a large volley back and forth. You get a first strike and maybe then a follow-up strike, and that'll be it. But I think a large strike comes before the Antichrist appears, or at least reveals himself. I shouldn't say reveal himself, but when he announces himself on the world stage in a way that he can resolve all the issues of the world and fix the economy and fix world war. When he does that, I think just prior to him doing that, the world will be at war, and there will be a famine and there will be economic collapse all happening at the same time. So much so that we are all desperate. We're in such a state that the world, the citizens of the world, will give up their sovereignty, give up their freedom for peace and security. And I think that's the only way the Antichrist is actually going to come to power. And are we moving to nuclear war? Are we moving to a catastrophic event which would really set up the Antichrist to take that power in the world and rise to the occasion, if you will? Absolutely. We are heading headlong into nuclear war. Medvedev, this is Debka.com, he says, in a nuclear war, a preemptive strike is the rule. So you won't even know it's coming. They're just going to launch. There's going to be no news publication. There's going to be no warning when World War III does start in terms of nuclear war. It will be a preemptive strike, and that is the rule that countries are going by. Because if you're second to the fight, that means you're already wiped out. A retaliatory strike means that nuclear weapons are on the way or have already done their damage. So you don't want to be retaliating in World War III or a nuclear war. You want to be the one doing the preemptive strike. Russia knows that. They've been planning for war against Russia for decades, and their own generals will say as much. Russian ex-president Medvedev said May 27th on Saturday that the West does not fully realize the threat of nuclear war. And I agree. I think the U.S. I think intellectually in their brains, on paper, they recognize it, but because of all the nonsense and stuff that's guiding them and the decisions, they're not willing to really consider this or let the public know because that would scare the public. They want this war to continue to simmer and not go hot, if you will, with NATO. The U.S. does because they're making so much money, billions, even trillions of dollars. If they can keep that cash cow going and keep the taxpayer paying to make all these people rich and maybe some kickbacks to the political folks who are in charge, then they're going to keep it going as long as they can. Folks, this is corruption. This is absolute 100% corruption, and this is completely what you would expect in the last days. But Russia's saying, you know what, you're getting close to nuclear war. Speaking after the transfer of parts of Russia's tactical nuclear weaponry to neighboring Belarus on the Ukraine border, there are irreversible laws of war, it says, to nuclear weapons. There will have to be a preemptive strike. This is Medvedev saying there will have to be a preemptive strike. And Russia's not going to be the retaliatory country here. I believe they will be the one to preemptively attack because they can't afford to do anything else. They can't afford a second strike against NATO, which has a nuclear weapons spread all over the place. And so, folks, be prepared. I think we will see nuclear war in North America. Belarus official. The West has left us no choice but to deploy nuclear arms. Western countries left Belarus no choice but to deploy nuclear weapons and had better take heed not to cross red lines on key strategic issues, a senior Belarusian official said, and that's on Sunday. So they're getting close, folks. There are red lines. The U.S. and the West has crossed a lot of red lines in Ukraine against Russia. Russia's been very patient. Nord Stream was a red line, but they decided not to strike. And so Russia has decided not to strike. They've been very patient. Russia is playing a game of chess, and they're just kind of waiting, biding their time, and they will strike when they deem necessary, and particularly at the point at which they know they will win. And I think what they're waiting for is that timeline of a preemptive nuclear strike. They don't want it to happen, but I think this is kind of the timeline that they're waiting for. And if the West, if the United States pushes them too far, they will have to resort to that. All right, a surveillance state. This is a worldnetdaily.com, WND.com. Surveillance on every citizen on Earth. Now, doesn't that sound like a headline out of the Bible? Devious group looks to rule the entire world. Well, who are they talking about? Who is this devious group? Well, it's the World Health Organization, of course, right? Has set its sights on establishing a platform for global governance through healthcare. And this is what I mentioned before, that this is a perfect opportunity to say, in the name of public health and safety, we need to take away all your rights for the good of the many. You can't drive your car more than 10 kilometers a day for the good of for the good of your grandparents, for the good of your neighbor down the road, for their health and safety. Again, in the name of climate change and carbon emissions, you will not be able to do anything or go anywhere. They're going to completely limit your freedoms, again, in the name of public health and safety. And this is exactly where they're going. So I think it's interesting. And is that described in the Bible? Yeah, that's in Revelation 13. And it says in Revelation 13, the second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship, who refuse to follow along and bow to this and go along with the dictates, to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell. I believe we'll get to a point where they will limit you from participating in the economy. Now, what did they do during the pandemic when you had to show your Vax Pass to get into some grocery stores? When you had to show your Vax Pass to travel, from even province to province or country to country, they limited your ability to act in the economy. They limited your economic input, your economic options. And that worked very well, and they are paying attention. So what's Satan going to do? Well, he's going to do that to the max in the last days with the mark of the beast, where you cannot buy or sell unless you have this mark, unless you have this thing. They they will cut you out of the economy. You won't be able to buy food. You won't be able to pay your taxes, so the government will take your house. You won't be able to pay for your mortgage. You won't be able to hold a job down because you're going to require all this to go to the office and for the health and safety of others. You're going to require all this, even to have proper documents, maybe your driver's license with the government. You're going to require these things. These are going to be mandatory, people. So this is coming. And you and I, we've lived through this. We've seen an example of this. And the citizens of the world, the citizens of the countries, no one cares. The vast majority don't care about what's going on. And certainly, have the governments been turfed out? No. Heading to the Middle East, U.S. flaunts massive ordnance penetrator bomb that can wipe out Iran's nuclear facilities. So again, another kind of warning threat to Iran. Iran is steadily building a nuclear facility that is most likely beyond the GBU-57's range, which is thought to be the U.S. military's last-ditch weapons to destroy underground bunkers. On May 2nd, the U.S. military released images of GBU-57B massive ordnance bunker buster, or MOP, at the Whitman Air Force Base. This facility has two U.S. B-2 bombers. In the caption, the base stated that it had received two MOP bombs, so a munitions squadron there could test their performance. And so they're threatening Iran, in hopes that Iran's going to stop doing what they're doing, which is not going to be the case. This is one of the locations of the underground bunkers. Iranian workers are building a nuclear facility near a peak of the Zagros mountain in central Iran, so deep underground that it's likely beyond the range of a last-ditch U.S. weapon designed for such sites. So will there be an arms race to get the next bunker buster bomb ready, or is the timeline is the countdown clock is it heading downwards, getting to zero, to where if they don't strike now with Israel, they're not going to be able to do any sort of strike. So that's interesting. Now another thing, biblically speaking, and we're going to take a look at Ezekiel 38 and 39. This speaks of the Ezekiel 38 war, the invasion of Gog and the land of Magog against Israel and the participating countries, Iran, Turkey. And in verse 13 it says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish. Now this, some people suggest describe, Britain. And all her villages will say to you, villages and all the young lions in another translation, that suggests the offspring of this country, which is Britain. And so some people suggest, well, that could include, the United States, offspring of Britain. They will come and say to you, have you come to take a plunder? Have you come to gather hordes to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock, and to seize much plunder? Now, this is interesting because they're taking a whole bunch of stuff that you would have incentive to take at a time when there's economic collapse and famine. They're taking away silver and gold, and they're taking away livestock and goods. So at a time when the world has collapsed, probably due to war, they're marching on Israel to basically gather up what maybe they've lost during that war. And when the world is in a worldwide famine and global economic collapse, they're taking the money and they're taking the food. So that's interesting. But the other thing is the idea that, why are Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and her offspring, or all our villages, why aren't they just saying words and not coming to the rescue of Israel during this Ezekiel 38 war and invasion? Well, I've suggested in the past that it's because either they're unable to or they're unwilling. They may be unable to because maybe they've been nuked, maybe they've been destroyed or invaded, the U.S. or something, or maybe they're unwilling politically to support Israel anymore. Maybe the woke voices have gained control, and there's just no public will or money in the coffers to defend Israel, to help defend Israel. Now, this is for a purpose and a plan so that God can show his power to Israel when Israel cries out in desperation for him to save them. But it gives you an interesting clue as to maybe what has happened to the United States in the last days. Now, do we see evidence of the United States maybe moving away from defending Israel in the last days? Well, this was interesting. This is worldisraelnews.com. Foreign policy expert, May 28, 2023. U.S. is disengaging from the Middle East. And let me see if this goes into detail here. It says focus on Ukraine and China will hurt Israel, both because Iran threat is being ignored and Arab states feel alliance with Washington is weaker. A foreign policy expert and advisor to three presidents said the United States is disengaging from the Middle East to the detriment of its own interest and Israel's. So they're disengaging politically, militarily, and which is interesting because that is basically what you can deduce from reading what's happening in verse 13 here with what likely speaks of or includes the United States as a country asking the invading hordes questions, but not actually coming to the defense of Israel. So it could be a combination of things. They may not have the political will, and they may not have the ability. If a preemptive nuclear strike occurs, the U.S. may be bankrupt and destroyed at that point, and there may be a Mad Max situation, across North America due to this, and it would be across North America, not just in the United States. Even if Canada didn't get hit, we are so affected by the U.S. Supply chains, food supply chains would be absolutely destroyed, decimated. It would take months, if not years, to rebuild all the things if there's a significant strike, and so that could be it. It could be both things happening in Ezekiel 38, and I think Ezekiel 38 and 39 happens at a time maybe after World War III and just before the Antichrist. So interesting things. The Bible describes times that we're seeing now: wars and rumors of wars, nations against nation, kingdom against kingdoms, and the battle is being waged. And apparently, according to Russia, they have already decided that when the time comes, they will be the ones initiating, instigating, doing the preemptive nuclear strike on all of NATO, because they know that they can't win. It's not going to be good. It's going to the best outcome is to preemptively strike and not to be the retaliatory striker. Even if you have some submarines that can go and do that retaliatory strike on whatever nation tosses those nuclear weapons your way, your country is effectively destroyed. So best to be the preemptive strike, and hopefully you've got some plans to deal with that retaliatory strike, that secondary strike that's going to come as soon as that the nation you're hitting wakes up and realizes that they're coming. So maybe they have some defense against submarine launched nuclear weapons and that kind of secondary deployment of nuclear weapons. So it may not be mutually assured destruction. You would expect that Russia would have thought about it, and they absolutely would. It would be absolutely ignorant of them, and both sides have thought about it. how do you defend against the follow-up retaliatory strike? And maybe Russia has plans in place to basically limit it. So you do a preemptive strike, and if you can take care of that retaliatory strike, well then you come out unfazed mostly, but you've destroyed your enemy. So I have no doubt that Russia has a plan. Whether it will work or not, I don't know. But their cards are on the table. They will do a preemptive strike, and that suggests that the time is even closer, because now they're both kind of jumping over each other, to decide, well, who's going to preemptively strike, who's going to do the strike first, and they're going to have to each move up their timeline to figure out who's going to do it. So the time is short. The warning is out there. Nuclear weapons. And never has there been a time like this where both sides have been talking about nuclear weapons so much, so often, every day, for an extended period of time. In the last 6 months, a year, nuclear weapons have been just in the public realm for discussion. To be honest, in really most absolutely alternative news, at least, that you watch. So this is out there, folks. So they're getting prepared for it, and this could very well be the way North America is taken out. And that's just the truth of it, folks. You could be looking at a Mad Max scenario, but it sets up the world perfectly for an Antichrist figure, for world dominance, world control, in the name of public health and safety. And that's what most people would vote for. If there was a nuclear war, they would vote for an organization that's going to put their public health and safety first, and maybe come up with a plan to save them from the nuclear fallout, right? So, the whole world and all the citizens would be in a perfect position in terms of the World Health Organization's viewpoint, to really accept global control, basically because they're desperate at that point. So, folks, I will leave there. I've gone on enough. I hope you're prepared. I hope you know the Lord Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. He's coming soon. You need to ask. You need to ask the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart. Ask Him forgiveness for your sin. Recognize He died on the cross about 2,000 years ago for my sin and your sin. And recognize He's coming soon. But before that, there's going to be a lot of hard times coming. So you just need to have your heart ready for that, folks. And I'll leave there. We'll see you guys in the next video.